Okay, I have a bit of a tough question for you today, but I want you to be really honest with yourself. When was the last time that you chose your spouse over your business? Not because of a crisis or an emergency, but just because they mattered more. Because here's the thing that I find about the busyness of building a business, it kind of creeps up on you. What starts out as just, I just have to get through this busy season, and then suddenly you realize that busy season never really ended, and you've been busy since day one, and there's really no end in sight. And then somewhere along the way, your spouse, kids, those people that you started your business for, your why, they started getting what was left of you instead of getting the best of you. Now, I do not say this to judge or condemn. We've all been there, okay? This is just maybe a wake up call that you need, that I have certainly needed at certain phases of my business. And it's inspired by, as the rest of this series, the next chapter in the book that we've been reading, Leadership Not by the Book. This is chapter 6, and he's talking about something that honestly is a little bit sacrilege in the business world. And that means I'm absolutely here for it because it's one of the ways that David Green built a business outside of the best practices of business. And it's absolutely working for him. And it certainly follows biblical principles. It's based on the question that he asks. He says, could prioritizing the people you love mean giving up on an entrepreneurial dream? And his answer is, yeah, it might. The real question is, what do you want in the end? And I'll tell you right now, that question, that got to me. So that's what we're going to be talking about a lot today. Before we dive into this, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, ring that notification bell, and share this video with another Christian entrepreneur that you think will be encouraged by it as well. All right, let's get into it. So this chapter was kind of the opposite of the last chapter for me when I first started reading it. If you've seen the last video, which if you haven't, let me just pause for a quick second here to say that this is a series. It's kind of best watched in order. So if you're finding this video first, I highly recommend that you put a pin in that. You go back, you watch this video first. That's the first one, and just kind of watch it all the way through. The topics are in order as they were in the book, but for good reason, I think. So highly recommend that you do that and then come back and watch this video. But the last video, we were talking about a chapter that's all about legacy. And as I mentioned, when I first started reading that chapter, I thought, oh, this isn't going to apply to me at all. It's going to be totally not relatable. And then God did his thing, and it was more relatable than I had ever imagined. This one, though, when I first started reading it, I was like, well, yeah, this is like right up my alley. I totally get this, because this is all about the importance of putting your spouse, your family, your friends, people as more important than your business. And it's a tough one. Don't get me wrong. Like, this is what I'm saying, like being able to create these kinds of boundaries in a healthy way so that you're giving your business what it needs, but more importantly, giving your family what they deserve. It's not always easy, that balance, but it is so, so important. And I absolutely believe that that philosophy is one of the reasons why Hobby Lobby does so well, because not only did he embody that philosophy in his own work and, bringing his family into the business and things like that, but he has that same philosophy for his employees. They have the same ability to put their families first. If he's going to do it, if he knows it's important, what right does he have not to allow his employees to do that? Which is interesting, because in the last chapter, we were talking about, the commonalities in companies, large companies that have lasted a century or more. And we weren't focused on how to manage employees. That wasn't the point of, what they were doing in common that made their companies so long lasting. It's interesting that the flip side is a little bit more about that here, where we are talking about the importance of that work-life balance for ourselves, but anybody that we work with as well. And I think too, even for me, for my clients, because a lot of what I do as a Trello consultant and as a process and just business consultant in general is I'm helping people to streamline their processes and their workflows so that they don't have to do every tiny little thing, and they do have the freedom to make these choices and create this balance for themselves and for maybe their employees. So this chapter really kind of helped me put what I do in that practical business in some really good perspective. It made me feel really proud of what I'm helping people do. But as we usually do, we're going to start with scripture first because, yes, this book is inspiring the series, but the scripture is obviously more important and inspires our entire way of life. So I went on a search as I was preparing this episode because I know that it is a biblical principle to prioritize people, to prioritize your spouse, that these things are important. I know that. But I was curious, are there any verses that really kind of clarify the importance of putting those people over work and over business? And turns out there are. So I'm going to read the ones that I found to you. You're welcome to go in and, do more context research on your own. I'm only going to read little verses, tiny little passages here today. But I just found it interesting that not only was this concept definitely talked about in the Bible, but it was in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and it was said in different ways. And so I found that really cool and really encouraging, and also just a great reminder that this idea of work-life balance, even though it has been completely co-opted by our culture and our society, it's biblical too. So we're going to start in the Psalms. And like I said, I'm only reading specific verses, so please take the time to go and read the passages. We're starting with Psalm 127. I'm going to read verse 2, and these are all going to be in the NLT. But it says, "It is useless for you to work so hard from early morning until late at night, anxiously working for food to eat, for God gives rest to his loved ones." I really like that one. Second verse we're going to be reading is in Proverbs. Proverbs 23, verse 4, and it says, "Don't wear yourself out trying to get rich. Be wise enough to know when to quit." Okay, let's put a pin right here for a quick second. Be wise enough to know when to quit. There are a lot of places we can go with that. And when we think back to what I said at the beginning, that question that David asked that kind of inspired this chapter, is it possible that in order to prioritize family and all of that, that we might have to give up an entrepreneurial dream? And he said, yeah, it might. And yes, I mean, I'm not saying that this specifically means you should go quit your business, but it might, right? Be wise enough to know when to quit. But it also could mean just for the day, right? Like, you've been working too long. This is something that Puffin, my puppy, is very, very good at cluing me into when I'm not paying attention. He will suddenly come and start begging and whining and crying when I've been sitting at my computer way later than I normally do. So it absolutely could just mean that, be done for the day, go home, be with your family. But it also might mean what David said at the beginning, that you realize that what you're pursuing in this business is not more important than your family. And that is a hard pill to swallow. And if that is hitting you in a certain way right now, let me know in the comments, because I would love to pray for you that God will show you if that is really what he's trying to tell you right now. Because just because we feel like quitting doesn't necessarily mean that we should. But I mean, maybe it does. And then the last passage, this is where we're going to the New Testament in Luke. We're going to Luke 12, verse 15. This is part of the parable of the rich fool. And it's a little bit different because this one is not specifically talking about taking a rest and things like that. But it's a good reminder in this context, I think, anyway. He says, "Then he said, 'Beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own.'" And that's hard to hear as a business owner, because we measure success of a business by how much money we're earning and, whether we're self-sufficient and all those things. And those are good things, but it's not what a life is measured on. And our life is so much more important than our business. But there were some things that David said in this book. David, and actually he quoted someone else that we'll get to in a minute. Some interesting things that came up during this chapter in particular. So, I'm going to read a few of those and kind of just give you what I was thinking when I read those, and just some thoughts that I have about it. And then I want to hear what you think about it in the comments as well. But going back to the one that I mentioned at the beginning, where he said, "Could prioritizing family mean you might have to give up some entrepreneurial dream?" It might. The question is, what do you want in the end? And I said at the beginning that this concept is like kind of sacrilege in the business world. And it is. The idea that any of us would make the choice to give up our dream for someone else, or even for someone else's dream, it's not something that is typically praised or encouraged in our culture, especially in the business culture. I hate to say it, but it tends to be very self focused. Even sometimes when it's posed in an altruistic light, when you look at the heart of what's being said, it really kind of is selfish and it's about our dream. And I think that our willingness to potentially put someone else's needs in front of our own, in front of our own dreams, in front of our own business, that is one of the biggest ways as Christian business owners that we can stand out in our culture and in our industry and in our society, because it's just so rare. We see people doing great things through their business for other people, and that's fantastic. I'm not judging any of that at all. But what if the best thing that you can do, the biggest impact you can have, is to give up the dream of your business, to walk away from it, to put someone else's needs over your own? That's a deep, thought-provoking concept. So I again don't have answers here. It's just things that really stuck out to me. And it kind of went hand in hand with this next question. I think this was part of the same section of the chapter where he asked the question. This was in context of, I believe, a story he was telling about a specific business owner or something. I don't remember the specifics. I read this chapter a little bit ago, so apologies that I don't remember that. But the question still sticks out to me here. It said, is the destruction of your family worth $117 billion? Obviously, there's a specific reason for that number in the context. But when I read that question, I thought it's not even a contest. Obviously, taking the specificity of $117 billion, let's just replace that number with success, the success of your business. Is the destruction of your family worth the success of your business? No, it's still no contest. And that's, for me, as soon as I read that question, the first thing that I dream of when I think of my business becoming the success that I hope it will be one day and all of that, I think about all of the ways that I would make my life better with Glenn, for all of the many, many puppies we would have, because at that point, absolutely, there would be more puppies. I think about those things first, like what I would use that success to create for us in our lives. So if I had to lose the us of it all in order to have that success, what's the point? Why would I even need or want the success anymore? So to me, it was just an obvious question, but I can see how that wouldn't necessarily be an obvious question for some people, because, sometimes that pursuit, and the destruction that's in the wake of it happens so gradually that you don't realize that it's happening. And, you ask the question in such a black and white way, and it seems like there's an obvious answer, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy to live that out, right? But yeah, again, thought-provoking, interesting questions. And then this next statement, he said, God didn't make human beings only for work. First off, can I get an amen? Because thank God. But it got me thinking about the pandemic, honestly. And, obviously it was not a net positive for our world. A lot of horrible things came out of the pandemic. But there were some positives that came out of it as well for a lot of people. And, for me specifically, I see a ton of them in my own life. And, I was thinking about this from the perspective of the impact that it had on the corporate world, and by association, entrepreneurial world, and all of that. It created the actual reality that work-life balance can be a thing. I think about all the time that I truly wasted on my commute, just sitting in bumper to bumper traffic from downtown LA. Yeah, okay, I listened to podcasts and stuff. Shout out Crime Junkie. I loved listening to podcasts and having a little bit of that me time, I guess, but it was just such a waste of time. And by the time I got home, I was even more tired from just the stress of being in the car than I would have been if it had just been around the corner, or if even better, I got to just work from home. And since basically day one of the pandemic, I haven't set foot in a corporate office since. And I know that that's not true for everyone. Some people have gone to meetings and, whatever, even if they still work from home, they've still gone. I literally have not gone, and I've hopped from job to job and still haven't set foot in an office. And yes, there are downsides to that. Absolutely. There are aspects of working with colleagues in person that I miss, sure. But there are some things that I never dreamed could actually be the reality of my life working in a corporate environment. Things like my puppy laying on my lap while I'm working, or taking a quick puppy break to take him outside and just go out in the sun, between meetings, or, take a kiss from my husband after a meeting or before a big meeting, or whatever it might be. Just having that kind of freedom, and then also just the lack of wasted time in the car. I almost never am in the car anymore because my commute is from my bedroom to my home office, and it's wonderful. There's never any traffic at all. And while I recognize that's not for every personality, for me it always felt like a pipe dream. I'd had tiny little glimpses of it earlier in my corporate career, one day here or there, and it was just so beautiful. I never thought it could be my reality. And now it has been for going on 6 years. That's crazy and amazing and wonderful. And I absolutely believe that this is more the lifestyle that we were created to have, more time in the home and around our family, even though work still needs to happen. Then another section of the chapter, he was quoting Ruth Bell Graham. And if you know who Ruth is, she is the wife of late evangelist Billy Graham. In fact, Ruth might also have passed on by now. I'm not actually sure. Someone fact check me in the comments. I've heard this quote from her before, but so let me just tell you what it is. So she said, "If God had answered every prayer of mine, I would have married the wrong man 7 times." It's a little bit funny, but at the same time, it's like, oh yeah. I think, and I've, like I said, I've heard this quote before, and I've always thought of it in context of same situation, relationships. I think about people that I thought I was going to marry at one point, and what my life would be like now if I had married them instead of marrying Glenn, and just all the things, right? I've thought about all of that. But this time I thought, okay, I'm going to look at this from a different perspective because we're talking about business here. And I applied this concept to the many different businesses that I have attempted and failed to start, even just in the last 6 years. I mean, I had my vocal coaching business before that. I don't see that one as a failure because I intentionally, walked away from it, put it down. But I think about the different pivots that I did, that we all do, trying to figure out what my business was meant to be. And I look back at the ones that just didn't work out, even though I poured my heart and soul into a certain concept and then just nothing. And I realized, like, at this moment that those were no's from God. He was saying, nope, that's not the thing. You just keep going in this direction. I will show you the thing. It's coming, right? And I look back at it and I think, oh man, if I had been doing that, what my business would look like right now, what I would be spending my time doing, and, ultimately would I have enjoyed it? I'm not sure I would have. I think I was trying to fill a need that I saw, but not necessarily something I was truly passionate about. And so I think it's just one of those reminders that, sometimes when God says no, or maybe always when God says no, he knows what he's talking about. So I encourage you to kind of take this and apply it to your life, maybe the last 5-10 years, and just look at all of the no's that you've gotten, the little mini failures, the pivots and whatnot in your business. And just remember that God's had a plan. He's working you towards something. And whether you've found it yet or not, they're guiding you along the path. And it's been making it a lot easier for me, even now, just after reading this, to accept the little no's that I'm getting from him, even now. So I encourage you to look back and apply that in your own life, because I think you might be surprised what you find there. And this last quote that caught my attention actually had me going back into my Bible, because I was like, wait, really? Is that really in there? So he said, how you treat your spouse plays an important role in how God answers or doesn't answer your prayers. Christian husbands, and I insert and wives, who fail to honor their wives and husbands should expect their prayers to go unanswered. expect their prayers to go unanswered. And I was like, wait, what? Because then he says after that something like, this isn't just what I believe, this is biblical. And I was like, it is? Like, why don't I remember hearing that? And so, again, back to the Google for research. And I found a verse that says this in 1 Peter 3:7, again in the NLT. Let me just grab that real quick. And this is during a section where Peter is talking about like the importance of how we treat each other and whatnot. But it says, in the same way, you husbands must give honor to your wives. Treat your wife with understanding as you live together. She may be weaker than you are, put a pin in that, but she is your equal partner in God's gift of new life. Treat her as you should, so your prayers will not be hindered. Now, we put a pin in that because I know a lot of people take verses like that and make it seem like God's this like misogynist or whatever. That's not what he's talking about at all. In this time period, which we always have to put these in the context of when they're being said and who they're being said to, women had very little rights, right? They were absolutely the weaker of the partnership in that situation because they didn't have the same rights as the men and they didn't have the same status. So, and obviously there are physical weaknesses too, but I don't even know if that's specifically what Peter was referring to. But the point being is that it's not in any way saying that women are lesser than. It's just stating a fact in their time period. But even still, it says, even though she may be weaker than you are, she's your equal partner in God's gift of new life. Equal partner. And then treat her as you should so your prayers will not be hindered. I never really thought about that, but I think it's a great way to kind of close out this concept is that how we treat our spouse, and by extension our family, is so important to God that he's saying, look, if you're not giving them what they need and you're not prioritizing them the way that you're supposed to, I might not answer your prayers. I think that's a pretty clear direction for us here as far as what is meant to be more important, your spouse, your family, or your business. So I just wanted to leave you guys with those thoughts. I'd love to hear anything that you guys think about any of what I talked about in the comments. Thanks for watching this episode all the way to the end, and I hope that you liked it, and more importantly, that you found it helpful. If you did, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with another Christian business owner that you know is going to love it as much as you did. God bless you.